heck did the book go? I keep putting stuff places. Where on earth? There it is. Here we go. Ming, China, and Vietnam. This is cool stuff. And you know what? I totally remember like reading about this stuff in the past. And I dug out, look at these things. This is awesome. This is like, what is this? This is like from graduate student days. An outline of an embassy to Annan, chapter 1. We got all kinds of stuff here. Reading what do we got here? What the heck is this? Oh, Bang Zhao Lu. All kinds of things here that I did in the past. Look at how incredible this is. See if I can find a page here. I'm just amazed. Writing, handwriting, all this stuff we got here. Where's a good example? Here we go. So this is what I would do. Apparently, I remember studying with this guy, this professor, and so see if we can see this here. Look at that. So before class, I'd go in, I'd write down characters that I didn't know. Then next to it, I'd have the pronunciation in Juin Fu Hao or Bopo Mofo, the Taiwanese way of doing it. I got the definitions over here, and these are all the notes that I took when I was reading through this with this retired professor from Taida. That was the days, man. I love that stuff. But yeah, reading all this Ming stuff. What the heck is this? Please remit tuition before March. Oh, 1999. Oh, I thought I owed money to someone. No. Ming relations with Dai Viet is really... What on earth is that? Cool stuff. I have no idea. Wow. Okay, so I just read this book, this one right here, Ming China and Vietnam, Negotiating Borders in Early Modern Asia by Kathlene Baldanza, Assistant Professor of History and Asian Studies at Pennsylvania State University. I just reviewed it for the bulletin of the School of Oriental and African Studies in London. I think that'll come out in like this summer, but when they only give you like 1,000 words to review something, I always feel that there's so much more to say, and so I thought I would take this vlog here to talk about it. Do I like the book? I like this book. This is a good book. In fact, I will go so far as to say that this is the best book, the best monograph on Sino-Vietnamese relations that has ever been written. What makes it the most sophisticated? Well, the thing I love about this book is that it's looking at the Ming period, and it basically looks at all of the stuff that happens during the Ming, from peaceful interactions to the Ming occupation in the early 14th century to all the problems of trying to deal with Mac Dongzum a century later, and that extends all the way to the end of the Ming period. It's about all of these efforts to find resolutions to issues that come up in Ming-Dai Viet relations. And what's great about this book is that it brings to light, in I think English for the first time, something that's very obvious in the sources from that time period, and that is that the Chinese debated endlessly about how to deal with Vietnam. I'll just say Vietnam. I'm going to use China and Vietnam. Yes, I know that there was no China at that time, and Vietnam is a construct and all this. Yeah. But I'll still use those terms anyway, now that I got that out of the way. Whew, okay. So, at the Ming court, every time they had to think about some issue in Vietnam that they needed to deal with, there would be one side that said, let's conquer and reincorporate this area into the empire, and one side that says, let's just leave that place alone and not have anything to do with it. And what's fascinating about these two sides is the evidence or the logic that they use to defend their positions. The people who wanted to incorporate Vietnam into the Chinese Empire said that the Vietnamese were similar to them, and they studied the classics, they were like people in China, and the place had been part of the Chinese Empire in the past, and therefore should be part of it again. The people who argued in favor of not having anything to do with Vietnam characterized the Vietnamese as very different from the Chinese and said they're barbarians, they're not like us, we shouldn't have anything to do with them. The reason why this is important is, first of all, because these debates have not been talked about in detail in English before, so that's one reason why this is good. But it's also important because the logic is the opposite of what many people assume had been the logic in the past. There are many people who will tell you that the Chinese were always waiting for an opportunity to invade Vietnam, and that they used the excuse of needing to go civilize the Vietnamese as a means to do that. Actually, the logic worked in the exact opposite direction, or in the exact opposite way. Seeing the Vietnamese as not civilized was the justification for not invading, for leaving the place alone. It was never used as a reason to go there to transform the place. That is a completely false modern invention, and this book clearly documents the kind of debates that took place there. So that stuff is fantastic, and I'm so happy that it's so clearly documented here and ably documented. This Kate Baldanza definitely can read these materials. She's not messing around, she knows what she's doing, and she's done a great job here, and that makes this a really valuable monograph. The only thing that kind of makes me kind of go, I don't know if you really got it there, is this one theme that Baldanza takes on in this book. And this is this idea that essentially what she argues is that the Vietnamese elite and the Chinese elite were both the upholders of this classical tradition of learning. We all know that. And the Chinese saw themselves as the center of this world of learning. We all know that as well. What she argues, though, however, is that there are cases, and she shows them in this book, where Vietnamese envoys to the Ming court, for instance, displayed their learning in an effort to try to sway the Ming emperor or the court officials to do things that they wanted. And they felt that by showing them, look, we are part of this educated world, that the Ming would then somehow agree to their demands. And so one very clear example here is the embassy of this guy Phuong Khắc Quan in the late 1500s, who went to the Ming capital to try to get the title of the Kingdom of Dai Viet restored to what it had previously been. It's a long story, but when the Mac took over, Mac Dongzung, the Chinese essentially demoted Vietnam from a kingdom to something that we call in English a pacification commission. It's like a lower level administrative unit in the Chinese administrative world system. And the Vietnamese didn't like that, or I should say the Lê Dynasty officials did not like that, and they wanted to get it re-elevated to the level of kingdom so that their ruler could be called a Guoc Vương, or a kingdom king, a king. And so Phuong Khắc Quan went on a mission to do this, and it was the Emperor Wan Li's birthday, and Phuong Khắc Quan presented all of these poems to the emperor, that were very erudite, filled with quotations or allusions to information in the Confucian classics. And Baldanza argues that this was all done as part of a way to try to kind of win over the Wan Li emperor and to get him to grant or to re-grant the Kingdom of Dai Viet the status as a kingdom, or Guoc. However, it didn't work out. And what Baldanza argues is that it didn't work out because this was a kind of shock to the Chinese, that there were these people from outside the realm who were claiming to be civilized. And there are various passages in here where she characterizes the conflict there. And there ones, this characterization is the one that I have a little bit of trouble with. For instance, where does she say it here? This is going to be the point where I need to stop this video and find what I'm looking for. Okay, let me stop this thing and figure out where this... No, I'll just keep it rolling. Okay, so the story of Phung Kakwang's embassy shows that the mission became more fraught, like more problematic, when civilization left the borders, meaning when these people from outside the borders of the empire claimed to be civilized. And in the case of Dai Viet, cultural and political similarities were perceived by the Ming as threatening. Dai Viet's elites, represented by Phung Kakwang, were too close for comfort. So essentially what, and see, when I write stuff like this, I say, don't agree. I don't really agree with this. Whoops, this is too big. Essentially what Baldanza is arguing here is that this, these self-representations that the Vietnamese made as civilized people somehow just kind of shocked the Chinese, and they didn't like it. And the assumption here is, or the implication is that they made policy decisions based on these kind of uneasy, unhappy reactions. I just somehow I don't think we're quite at it yet. This is a really tough nut to crack, as they say. It's a tough topic to try to get to the bottom of, particularly because there's essentially no textual evidence that we can use to demonstrate what the Chinese thought when something like this happened. So we're doing this based on essentially historical guesswork. And the guessing that of this kind of big shock to the system that Baldanza is making here is a little bit too Hollywood for me. I kind of feel like this is the type of reaction that we expect in a Hollywood movie when someone is challenging the system and people are shocked to find that someone is doing that. My sense is that if we could go back in time, we would find that the world was quite a bit more ugly and nasty and hierarchical than we appreciate. And I think an example of it would be like, let's say that in the 1820s or something, someone at Oxford read something that we today think is fantastic by an American writer, and we can imagine, though, what someone at Oxford would think of this writing by some person off in the far-off land of America. We could see them reading it and then, you know, closing the book and going, not bad for a Yank. The prose is, of course, tedious, as can be expected of those country bumpkins, but, yes, it's a tolerably decent discussion of the human condition. For a Yank, of course. So my point is that I think people in the people in the past, especially elite people, we only got monkeys in the back, people in the past, especially the elite, were so confident in kind of worlds that were so strongly grounded in those societies that you really couldn't shake or rattle or shock any such people. And so, you know, I really doubt that something like Phung Kakwang presenting erudite poetry at the court really would have done anything to, one, change any opinions of anyone at the Chinese court, or to shock them either. It's just, they were the center of the world, just as Oxford was the center, from their perspective, of the educated world in, say, I don't know, they probably still think that way, who knows. And other people couldn't shake that, couldn't change that no matter what happened. And so I don't think someone at Oxford would have gotten so shocked by the writing of an American that they would do something drastic. They're still the center of the world. There are country bumpkins out there who can do some pretty smart things, but Oxford is or was the center of the world. And so this idea that civilization from beyond the borders somehow decentered China, that's another term used here, I don't really buy that one. But then again, I'm not providing textual evidence to support what I'm saying. I'm just doing historical guesswork as well, and historical analogy, but I feel more comfortable in comparing the way I think with the kind of nasty, hierarchical, really entrenched worlds that I believe existed in the past. But that's one that we can, leave open for debate. One thing we can't debate is that this is a darn good book, and that if we want to understand the history of Sino-Vietnamese relations during the period of what corresponds with the Ming dynasty, this is the book to read. If you want to understand what these foreign relations were like in a very divided world where the Chinese court debated policies and where Dai Viet was very divided as well. There's all kinds of political divisions that were at play that, Baldanza demonstrates we really need to take into consideration when we're looking at relations. This isn't the Chinese versus the Vietnamese. It's all kinds of competing ideas about the way things should be on both sides that then have to get negotiated, and that's fantastic. If you want a stimulating theory about how we should think about cultural relations in pre-modern East Asia, this is also a good book to get that exciting thought process going. So on the whole, and more than on the whole, just on every aspect, I really, really am happy that I read this book, and I'm extremely happy that this book was written. The one thing I wasn't happy about was that Cambridge is charging like $99 for a book. Cambridge, dudes. Now I see it's on sale for $74.50. Oh, what a steal. Way better than $99. You got 25% off. So if you want to buy it, by all means buy this. If you've got a library nearby where you can borrow it, go for that. But do give this a read. This is definitely, like I said, the best book on Sino-Vietnamese relations, or the history of Sino-Vietnamese relations, or Sino-Vietnamese relations in a certain historical period that has ever been written. It's the most sophisticated, it's well researched, it's on and on and on. Good book. Congratulations, assistant professor, no, probably associate professor now, I don't know. Assistant associate professor Kathlene Baldanza. This book rocks. Good job.